I would say French, Italian, English, Spanish, and Portuguese.
The language of deeds.
I show love by giving my boyfriend kisses, hugs.
Feeling safe with somebody. You can trust them.
Last but not least, maybe universal hope for peace. Who knows? Something of that nature.
Thank you. This session, we're going to talk about another very misunderstood aspect of love. It's what we typically call being in love. I want to begin by asking a question. Why do people get married? When young couples come to me for pre-marital counseling, I will often ask them that question. Why do you all want to get married? Whatever else they tell me, they always give me the big reason. And the big reason is always the same. What do they say? We love each other. Isn't that sweet? Then I ask them a very unfair question. I say, tell me, what do you mean by that? And if they haven't been holding hands, they'll reach over on the couch and hold hands. And they look at each other and smile and giggle and look around the ceiling and come back to see if I'm waiting for an answer, and I am. And one of them, whichever one talks the most, and always one does, one of them will say, well, you know. And I guess I know. I remember years ago when I went to my mother, and I said, Mom, how do you know when you're really in love? And my mother said what many mothers have said through the years. Son, if it's real, you'll know it. Now, folks, I like my mother, but that didn't help me at all. And the fact is, we don't give much help. Everybody seems to agree that the main thing you want to make certain of before you get married is that you're in love. But nobody bothers to explain that to you. So I want to talk about that in this session. This whole matter of being in love. Well, let me say that this aspect of love is a feeling. In fact, someone has said, love is the feeling that you feel when you feel a feeling like you've never felt before. I read one definition that said, love is a four-letter word composed of two consonants, L and V, two vowels, O and E, and two fools, you and me. Some truth to that. Another one, she said, he held me tightly. Chills ran down my spine. I thought it was love, but it was just his popsicle melting. But the one I like best is the old jungle animal hunt. Do you remember how they did it? You dig a hole in the ground about 5 feet deep, 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, and you camouflage it with sticks and leaves so the animal can't tell there's a hole. The animal is walking down the pathway and gets to the trap and falls into the trap. We even say we fall in love. And that's just about the way it happens. We fall in love. Well, I like to suggest to you that it all begins with what I call the tingles. Everybody has inside of them a little love alert system. It's very similar to a fire alarm, a little smoke alarm. And when you see certain people, there's something about the way they look, something about the way they talk, something about the way they emote that gives you a little tingle inside. In fact, it's the tingles that motivate us to go out for a hamburger. And you know, sometimes you lose the tingles on the first date. You find out something about them that's just intolerable. And the next time they call you for a hamburger, you're not hungry. And that relationship never got off the ground. But there are other people that every time you go out for a hamburger, it gets tinglier and tinglier and tinglier. And one night, one of you will say something like this: "You know, I think I could love you." We're testing the waters to see if they feel what we feel. Now, if they say to us, now, I've told you all along, this is just a friendship. Now, I have not been leading you along. This is just a friendship. If they say that, we go home that night and say, "Oh, man, why did I bring that up? How could I be so stupid?" But if they give you a positive response and say something like, "What would be so bad about that?" "Ooh, you have a tender evening." And the next time the moon is right, you will actually say the words, "I love you." And you wait for them to say, "I love you too." Woo! Now you know you got it because you said it out loud. And from that moment on, you literally get obsessed with each other. You can't get them off your mind. You go to bed thinking about them. You wake up thinking about them. All day long you think about them. They are the most wonderful person you have ever met in your life. Now, your mother can see their flaws, but you can't. Your mother will say, "Honey, have you ever considered they haven't had a steady job in 5 years?" And you will say, "Mama, give them a break. They're just waiting for the right opportunity." So we get obsessed with each other. I want to suggest to you that this experience is also accompanied by irrational thinking. Such ideas as that they are, in fact, perfect. I mean, really, they look perfect, they act perfect. I mean, they're the most wonderful person you've ever met. And such irrational thoughts is that nothing could be more important than being with them. And that's why sometimes people drop out of college and get married, because they want to be together forever. Or such irrational thoughts is that I will never be happy if we are not together. My life has no meaning if we cannot be together. Now, one of the things that having an anthropology background, one of the questions that came to my mind is this simply a Western phenomena, or does this exist in other cultures? So I went looking in other cultures, and I found out that this is transcultural. It is in all cultures, even cultures that are very different from our culture. For example, take the ancient Hebrew culture. There is a book called Judges that lists the acts of the judges in ancient Israel. One of them was named Samson, and here is a little note out of his early life. Listen to this, and I think you'll see a man that is in love. Samson went down to Timnah, the village of Timnah, and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife." Isn't that a good cultural? You get the tingles and send your daddy after her. Yeah. His mother and father said what a lot of mother and fathers say: "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among our people? Must you go to the Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson said to his father, "Get her for me. She is the right one for me." The guy's in love. He's obsessed with her. Just saw her for a weekend. Go get her, Daddy. There is a book called The Song of Songs. It's an ancient Hebrew romantic book. Here is the words of a woman who is in love. Now, the words don't fit our culture very well, but I want you to listen to it. She says, "My lover is radiant and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. If you line up 10,000 men, he will stand out above all of them. His head is purest gold. His hair is wavy and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves by the water streams, washed in milk, mounted like jewels. His cheeks are like beds of spice, yielding perfume. His lips are like lilies dripping with myrrh. His arms are rods of gold. His body is like polished ivory, decorated with sapphires. His legs are pillars of marble set on bases of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as its cedars. His mouth is sweetness itself. Listen to this. He is altogether lovely. This is my lover. This is my friend. The woman's in love. Ancient Hebrew in love, just as much as anyone in contemporary culture. In that same love story, here are the words from the man who's in love with that woman. Here's what he says. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Rather contemporary, huh? Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn. Each has its twin. Not one of them is alone. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with elegance. On it hangs 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Your two breasts are like two fawns, like twins of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. Now listen to this. All beautiful you are, my darling. There is no flaw in you. The guy's in love. This transcends all cultures. This experience has been going on as long as there have been men and women in the world. Now, what are the dangers of this experience? We all know the excitement of the experience, but what are the dangers of this experience? Well, it gives you an illusion that you have an intimate relationship. When you're in love, you really think that you have an intimate relationship. And you think that you have something that is going to last forever. In fact, when you talk to people who are in love and you talk about working on a marriage, they don't know what you're talking about. Why would you have to work on a marriage? I was in the airport some time ago and I met a young lady who was going to see her fiance who was stationed at a military base. And in the course of conversation, she asked me, what do you do? And I said, well, I lead marriage seminars around the country. She said, what do you do with those things? I said, well, I help people work on their marriage. And she said, why would you have to work on a marriage? She said, what is there to work on? Well, I knew she was in love. I mean, that's the way it is when you're in love. You feel like you've already got it. Why would you have to work on it? You've got it. You've got an intimate relationship. It also blinds us to our differences. That's why when I'm talking to engaged couples, I often say, what kind of music do you listen to? If you get in the car, do you turn the radio on? What kind of music do you listen to? And then I ask the other one the same question. I remember the wife who came back to me about 12, 18 months after she'd been married. She said, Dr. Chapman, he plays that dumb country western all day long, drives me up the wall. Well, wouldn't you think she would have known that before they got married? You know, she's a symphony gal, married to a bluegrass guy, a country guy, you know? You should be able to figure that out before you get married. How about our values? Do we have the same values? You know, here's a PhD who falls in love and marries somebody who can't read. But it doesn't matter. If you're in love, you're blinded to all of that. It many times leads us to faulty conclusions. Such conclusions as we'll never be happy without each other. Such conclusions as nothing else really matters in life. Nothing else matters except being with them. And such faulty conclusions that these feelings we have are permanent. They're going to last forever. If you have the real thing, it's going to last forever. The fact is, we've studied it. Dorothy Tenney, Bridgeport, Connecticut, long-term study on this in-love experience. You know what she found out? The average lifespan of the obsession is 2 years. Some a little longer, some a little less. If it's a secretive affair, tends to go on a little bit longer, but once it all comes out, the average is 2 years, and we come down off the high. Let's be glad for that. Folks, if we stayed obsessed forever, you'd have to close down business, industry, church, education. You can't get anything done when you're in love. If you're a college student and you fall in love, I can almost guarantee you your grades will go down. Got a test on the War of 1812. Who cares about the War of 1812 if you're in love? Now, how does this in-love experience contribute to divorce? I want to suggest that it is at the very heart of the divorce rate in this country. Let me give you the picture of what happens. A couple falls in love. They get obsessed with each other. They get married. Going to be happy forever. And the 2 years runs its course, and they come down off the high. And when they do, they begin to realize that they have a lot of differences. Boy, do I remember those days in my marriage. Before I got married, I had this vision in my mind that I'd come home every night. I was in graduate school, and I would be studying our little apartment, and my wife would be sitting on the couch. And when I got tired studying, I would lift my eyes, and our eyes would touch. Ooh, won't that be nice? A wife. But after we got married, I found out my wife did not want to sit on the couch and watch me study. If I'm going to study, she wanted to go downstairs to the apartment complex, meet people, talk to people, socialize. I'm up there by myself thinking, this is what it was like before we got married. Only difference, I was in that dorm room, a whole lot cheaper than this place. And before we got married, I had this idea that every night, about 10:30, we were going to go to bed together. Woo! Going to go to bed with a woman every night at 10:30. Woo! But after we got married, I found out it had never crossed her mind to go to bed with anybody at 10:30. Her idea was about 10:30, you come up from your visitation and you read a book till midnight. And I'm asking, why didn't you read the book while I read the book? Then we could go to bed together. And before we got married, I had this idea that every morning when the sun gets up, everybody gets up. But after we got married, I found out my wife didn't do mornings. Didn't take me long not to like her, and didn't take her long not to like me. And we succeeded in being utterly miserable. Little did I know that that's the pattern that many couples follow. When they come down off the high, they are shocked that they lost the feelings. And then they are really shocked at all these differences. And because of these differences, they get into conflicts with each other. And they didn't have a plan for solving conflicts because they thought they agreed on everything before they got married. They never dreamed they would have any conflicts. And so they have conflicts, but they have no plan to solve the conflicts, so they end up arguing with each other. And before long, they're saying nasty things to each other. This person that they adored, and they're saying all these harsh things to each other. And then they argue and then walk off, and nothing gets solved. And they've got all these conflicts that are unresolved. And that's when they get the thought in their mind, we're just not compatible. We shouldn't have got married in the first place. I mean, we're like night and day. I mean, I don't know how we got married. I must have been drunk. I mean, you know, and you get disillusioned with the whole thing because now you lost the feelings and all you have are the differences and the conflicts and you can't get them resolved, and there you are, and you get miserable in the relationship. I remember those days in my own marriage as well. And these conflicts either lead to fighting and arguing or they lead to withdrawing, depending on your personality. Some people want to fight to the end, and others want to withdraw just to keep from fighting because they don't like to fight. And what happens is they build a wall between them, a wall of unresolved conflicts. And now it's hard to talk through the wall. And the love feelings are gone, and the relationship in their own minds seems to be hopeless. They lose their sense of intimacy. And if you talk to a husband in a marriage like that, and he opens up at all, I can tell you what he will do. He will describe the blocks on her side of the wall. He will tell you what he considers to be the problem in the marriage. He will say such things as, "She spends more time with her mama than she does me. Wish somebody would tell her she's married. Why should I come home at night? She's talking on the telephone with her friends. Doesn't even know I'm in the house. Cook! Woman can't spell the word." But if you talk to his wife, you'll get a totally different story, because she will focus on what she considers to be the problem in the marriage. And she will say such things as, "On the day the baby was born, he played golf. On the day of my mama's funeral, he left the cemetery to go fishing." And she'll go on telling you what she considers to be his failures. And there they are, both blaming the other for their poor marriage. And then what happens? One of them gets the tingles for somebody else. And the whole scenario starts over. May I give you the picture of how that works in a marriage like I've described? It started yesterday morning for somebody. The husband went to work. Could have been the wife just as easily. Yesterday morning, he did, when he got to work, what he does every morning. He went to the coffee pot to get his coffee. But yesterday, this lady walked up to him and said, "Good morning." Woo! Kindest words he's heard in months. Good morning. 8:30 in the morning, and her hair is combed. And she smells good. And right away, he feels a tingle. He goes back to work, and about 10:30, he sees her going for coffee, and he gets thirsty. "Are you new around here?" "Oh, what's your name?" "Oh, where are you from?" "You know my friend, he used to work over there." A little coffee pot conversation. And the next few days, he arranges for a few more coffee pot rendezvous. And if he thinks that she is feeling what he is feeling, he will say to her, "How about lunch someday?" And they have a nice lunch. And he tells her what it's like at his house, just so she knows where he's coming from. And that lunch or the next lunch, she will tell him her story. Every woman has a story, a history. And then they start having lunches rather regularly, and they talk about everything freely. And 2 months later, he says to himself, "I don't understand this. I feel closer to this woman than I do my wife. We've been married 15 years. I don't have anything else to say to my wife, but it's easy to talk to this lady. It's like we're on the same wavelength." And then he will say to her, "I know a really nice place for dinner if you would ever be free." And if she is, he will take her to a nice restaurant. I mean one that has fresh flowers and candles on every table. I'm talking nice restaurant. And many times after that first dinner, they have an after-dinner rendezvous. Ooh. And a few more dinners and a few more rendezvous, and he is saying to himself, "Oh man, I don't know what my mother is going to say about this." And if he has children, he will say, "I don't want to hurt my kids. That's the last thing I want to do is hurt my kids." And then he will say, but you know it couldn't be good for the kids to be in our marriage and see the way we treat each other. You know that couldn't be good for the kids. Then if he's a religious man, he will say, you know, maybe God just brought this woman along to give me a taste of true love. Now, you know why I know that's not a wise road to follow? Facts. First marriages in this country, 40% end in divorce. Second marriages in this country, 60% end in divorce. Third marriages in this country, 75% end in divorce. Folks, do you think it gets easier down the road? No, no, no. It gets more difficult down the road. The greatest potential for your happiness in marriage is with the person to whom you're now married. Look, we can't go backwards. I know that in a group this size we have people that have been married more than once. We can't go backwards, okay? We can't unscramble eggs. We have to be where we are. But rather than following the tingles, why don't we learn to love each other? If you follow the tingles, you could get married 6, 8, 10, 12 times in a lifetime, just like they do in Hollywood. But you're not that rich. So what I'm saying to you is that the tingles will lead you down the wrong trail. Now, how are we going to handle that? How are you going to handle the tingles? You see, the tingles are not premeditated. You don't get up one morning and say, I think I'll get a cup of coffee and get the tingles for whoever shows up. No. It's just that you are going to meet some people in your lifetime that there's something about the way they look, something about the way they talk, something about the way they emote that gives you a little tingle. You didn't premeditate it, it just happened. Now, how are you going to handle the tingles so that you don't walk that road? Well, the easiest time to handle the tingles is the first morning at the coffee pot. So what do you do with the tingles? You go back to work, and if you have ever prayed, that's the time for you to pray. And here's the prayer. Oh, Lord, you know what I felt at the coffee pot. And you know the thoughts that ran through my mind. But I thank you that I don't have to follow the tingles. Now guide me as I go home and do my homework. And you go home and begin to speak your spouse's love language and seek to reinvigorate your own marriage. And that's the day you swear off a coffee. You don't go back to the coffee pot at 10:30. In fact, you don't drink coffee anymore. Now, if they ever leave the company, you can drink coffee again. But right now, you don't drink coffee. That's the easiest time to handle the tingles is the first morning at the coffee pot. You just don't let it happen. But what if you've already had the lunches and the dinners and the rendezvous and you're already into an affair? What are you going to do about it? The wise thing to do with an affair is you break it off. Oh, but we'll die if we can't be together. No, you won't die. We studied that too. No one in the history of this nation has ever died from breaking off an affair. Not one. A lot of folks died who didn't break them off. Now, I am not saying that it is easy to break off an affair. In fact, it is one of the most difficult things a person does. Why? Because the obsession is so high. I mean, you really feel like you'll die. You really feel like you won't be happy without them. I mean, that's part of the obsession. I didn't say it was easy. I said it was wise. But I've never met anyone who regretted breaking off an affair. But they are in my counseling office almost every week who had an affair 5 years ago and left their spouse and married the person they had the affair with, and now they're in my office trying to get help in that second or third marriage. Don't misunderstand me. I'm glad they're trying to get help. But it would have been a whole lot easier back upstream. You understand what I'm saying? We need to focus on the marriage we have and not be led along down the road on the tingles. Over the last 2 or 3 years, I've helped 6 men break off affairs. Excuse me. I've helped 5. One of them left his wife, ran off with a gal he fell in love with, saw me 5 months later and said, Dr. Chapman, I have made a serious mistake. Yes, but you can't unscramble eggs. See, we have got to give serious consideration to this phenomena that we call falling in love, because I believe it has led literally thousands of people into unwise decisions that have affected the happiness of the individuals involved and of the children involved many times. Well, let's say that you would like to have a better marriage. How are you going to pull that off? If you've got the conflicts and you're not getting them solved, if you spend time arguing or staying away from each other, if the wall is between you and you don't have the love feelings, you've been 2 years, it's been 20 years, you don't have the love feelings, what are you going to do if you want to have a good marriage? Well, the first thing you do is deal with the wall. And you say to your spouse, you know, I've been thinking a lot about us, and I realize that I'm not the husband or the wife that you deserve. I've failed you in a lot of ways. Here are some of the ways that come to my mind right now, and you spell them out. I know this is not everything, but I would really like to ask you if you would consider forgiving me for my failures. And I'd really like to work at becoming the spouse that you deserve. Wow. Will they forgive you? I can't guarantee it. But I can tell you this, it's the first step toward exploring the possibility. You can stay there for a long time arguing and not resolving anything or living apart from each other. But if you want it to be better, the first step is for you to begin to tear the wall down on your side by admitting your own failures and seeing if your spouse would consider forgiving you. Secondly, whether they forgive you, whether they don't, you learn their love language and you start speaking their love language on a regular basis. And because we all so desperately need love, when you start speaking their love language consistently, no matter how they respond to you, it won't be long until they will begin to feel that something really has happened to you. You really are different. And something inside of them begins to warm up toward you. And there's a good possibility that they will begin to reciprocate and reach out and ask your forgiveness and speak your love language. And when you do, the whole marriage is reborn. But you see, as long as we sit there and neither one of us are willing to make an effort to acknowledge our own failures and get on a positive track, we can sit there for years and the marriage will simply get worse. But if one of us chooses to reach out and tear the wall down on our side and to begin loving the other person, we are on the road toward the possibility of a renewed relationship. Nothing is more powerful in all the world in human relationships than love. And speaking their love language has tremendous potential. Now, we don't return to the obsessive stage of the relationship. You don't ever go back to that obsessiveness. But you do have warm, deep feelings for each other. And that meets the basic need that we have for feeling love. To me, this is not theory. To me, this is my life. My wife and I struggled greatly in the early years of our marriage. Really, before I got married, I thought we agreed on everything. I thought we were going to be happy forever. But I described for you some of our struggles in those early years. And unfortunately, it didn't turn around overnight because we didn't learn all this stuff quickly. But when we finally learned the things we've been talking about, our marriage turned around. And I've been reaching out to love her. She's been reaching out to love me. We speak each other's love language. My language is words of affirmation. Her language is acts of service. That's why I vacuum floors. That's why I wash dishes. And she tells me what a great husband I am. Before I left to come here, she said to me, "You have got to be the greatest husband in the world." I said, "Tell me one more time, babe. Tell me one more time." And you see, when we truly learn to love each other in the right language, it changes the whole climate. You are no longer enemies. You are now friends. You understand why I would say that what we've been talking about has the potential of saving thousands of marriages. I want to challenge you to apply this to your own marriage, and I want to challenge you to share this with your friends. We can make a difference in the world if we can help couples learn how to love each other effectively. Thank you for being here. I hope your life will be different because we spent this time together.